Welcome back to another episode of Two Plain Sports. Today we're going to talk a little bit more recruitment, talk about a couple um, wide receivers from the 2026 class. They're going to be visiting during Champion Barbecue, as well as Jim Nagy. No, it's not really too old a news, but we're going to talk about it here, to give our thoughts and how he can really help Oklahoma get to the next level, especially with recruiting. Let's go. All right. It's been a couple weeks, but we're back. We're going to take another hiatus next week. I'm going to be traveling, and Brandon's also traveling this week, so we're getting this one in a little early. But we're going to get back to the routine. We swear. But let's get to the first topic of this video. Jim Nagy has been hired at Oklahoma as the general manager. Very new position, something that's been created really for almost every team. Started seeing news about other teams kind of poaching each other's general managers, and Oklahoma hired a consulting firm a couple months ago to help with this search that ended up landing Jim Nagy. Brandon, do you want to start? What are your thoughts on Nagy and what he can do for Oklahoma moving forward?
I mean, just from just looking him up a little bit, I think there's a lot to like. He's got a ton of experience just in football in general. You know, he's 18 years in the NFL as a scouting guy for New England, Kansas City, Seattle, and Washington. So he's been around the scouting game for a while. His team's played in 6 Super Bowls, won 4 of them. So he's been a part of a lot of pretty good teams, I would say. You know, 6 out of 18, a third of your experience in the NFL. Your team's made it to the biggest game in football. That's a pretty good turnout. You know, he's obviously got some good teams, good coaches there, but you know they're playing in the biggest game, and he's playing a decent role in that as a scout, which is pretty cool. It sounds like he's going to be. You and I talked about it before we started recording. It sounds like he's going to be doing a lot of the recruiting for Oklahoma, or you know, kind of the insides of the recruiting. You know, the coaches will still be doing the recruiting and all that stuff. He's going to be. I'm sure he'll help out with his scouting, you know, analysis and stuff like that, and what he thinks would be a good fit and all that good stuff. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to be there and kind of help negotiate contracts now and, you know, things of that nature, which I think is going to be good. You know, I think once Curtis Lofton left the position, we kind of wondered who would be there and how long it would take and all this and that. And Jim Nagy's your answer. And I think that's a pretty solid hire, you know, with all things considered. He brings a ton of experience. If you follow, you know, a lot of the football guys on X, Josh Pate, Ian Rappaport, stuff like that, whenever the move was announced and official, all those guys were talking about how great of a move it was for Oklahoma, how he's going to work wonders, how great of a guy he is, you know, all sorts of things like that. Like all the things you want to hear about the guy that your team's bringing in to be the GM. Obviously, as the executive director of the Senior Bowl, he's been a big part of college football for a long time now in that role. Just interviewed for the New York Jets job in December as their GM. So he's been around. He's highly sought after. I think for Oklahoma to bring him in is great. Hopefully it works wonders in terms of recruiting and getting contracts done and things like that. And we see this team kind of get to where we want them to be, and we've wanted them to be for years.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing that we found when we were doing a little bit more digging on him is he was part of a group called the 33rd team, which for those people that don't know, it's basically a consulting group made up of executives, old head coaches and coordinators that are hired by NFL teams to help with searches for general managers, coaching staff, head coaches more specifically. So he has a lot of connections to the NFL. I think that's going to be really his strong suit coming in. Is I know what these NFL teams look for when it comes to marketing our players and making sure that they're prepared to go on to the next level. Where he can probably improve on, I'm not saying that he doesn't have a strong base already, is his connection to high schools. I think that's where, if he comes in, that's what is probably going to be the most helpful for this coaching staff. Is yes, they need to still, in a way, keep those connections to the coaches at those various high schools, but Jim Nagy can now be the contact to help organize travel, get them to the right places, get them in front of the right players, and expand that network. Because at the end of the day, a coach only has so much time. They have to do their number one job, which is coaching, getting this team ready. With Jim Nagy, that's something that has taken really a lot of that off their plate. And more than likely, he's going to be the one that continues to expand that network in Texas and Alabama, Mississippi, really the SEC area, because a lot of those seniors were, I mean, they're from around the country, but there's still a lot of seniors that were from SEC schools, and he now can bring a lot of those connections to Oklahoma. He's a well-connected guy. At the very least, if you don't want to know more about what the general manager is going to do or be, Jim Nagy is probably the most connected guy that you could have hired at this point. So that alone should be positive for what you could see Jim Nagy doing for Oklahoma. The NIL negotiating is probably the second biggest thing I would point out to like having a general manager now and why that's important, especially with the salary cap being a thing here in the next month or so. Once it gets passed by the Supreme Court, I believe, now he's going to have to work with Joe C and figure out, okay, we need to make 60% of that $20 million that's allotted for athletics to be for football because that is what's going to compete around the country. At the end of the day, Joe C is going to need to be the guy to also help other sports like basketball, softball, baseball, etc. Jim Nagy is going to be the one that stands on the table and says, "Hey, I need more money for football because Ohio State or Texas or someone else is putting 65% of that 20 million towards football, and we need to compete a little bit better for that." So that'll be interesting to see how that dances because now Josie isn't the guy that's directly involved with football. Moving forward, it's going to be Jim Nagy as the middleman there to help again Joe C look at the athletic department as a whole. He's been taking a lot of shots recently. This hire is probably something that he also loves because he can take a step back again and look at Oklahoma athletics as an entirety and not just football because that's been the highlight. I mean, Oklahoma football is a premier brand in college sports, but he needs to make sure that he can. I mean, a big thing that OU fans have been going after him for is not improving the baseball facilities, even with how good they've been over recent years. I mean, fans need to put some effort there as well. That's a different topic, but he needs to also help with getting some better facilities for that team because they have done their part in making that program really good, and Skip Johnson's done his part in making that program relevant in college baseball. So help them out a little bit with those funds to get the facilities up and running and up to date.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just, real quick shout out as if we're recording this, March 2nd, I believe, and I'm pretty sure we saw a stat or whatever. The University of Oklahoma is the only program in the country or school in the country that has both of their diamond sports programs, baseball and softball, are currently undefeated. And baseball is doing some big things. Softball is going to softball, but baseball has two top 10 wins, one top 5 win. So shout out those guys and gals.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be fun to see how this is going to evolve here over the next year because this has really just been a couple weeks of him having this role. I'm sure he's just been trying to fill out the staff because, as Brandon said, this is going to be a NFL like staff where you have scouts that are regional, you have guys that help with recruiting internally, probably with some of the negotiations, watching the market to see exactly how other people at other positions are getting paid. There's a lot he has to build out before we fully see the effects of him being in that role. So I would say in like by the time football season comes around, with the spring portal even coming up here in the next month or so, that's when we'll see how the effects of him being there and the retention ideally is priority here over the next few months because there's a reason some schools are canceling that spring game.
For sure.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next guy. or the next topic here. Moving on to recruiting, we're going to start with Daniel Odom, top 250 player in the country, Oklahoma commit already, wide receiver out of St. John Bosco High School in Bellflower, California. He stands at 6'1", 178 pounds according to 24/7. He committed to OU just about a month ago. This is someone that has very strong ties to Oklahoma quarterback commit Jaden O'Neal. Brandon, what do you think about Daniel? Is this going to stick with the other quarterback that could potentially be looming for Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Sooner fans, and I wanted to talk about the receiver room and receivers today in this video because I think that's one position that last year we 100% took for granted because it was going into the season, it was loaded, it had so much talent, and obviously we saw what unfolded, and it was just tragic and all this and stuff. So I think it's fun to talk receivers now, but I think as fans we can be excited about Daniel Odom and Jaden O'Neal because at the moment they are both currently committed to Oklahoma. I think if you follow Jaden O'Neal on Twitter or social media and all that stuff, it looks like he's trying to play for Mustang. I'm in Oklahoma for his senior season, which is a lot of fun. I think that also really pushes to the fact that he is unlikely to decommit. I think having Daniel Odom, as you mentioned, their bond already only helps keeping both of them. And both these kids can play, but we're doing the Odom video now. And I mean, if you look at his numbers, he's 548 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. So on 36 catches, so he's averaging about 15 yards a catch there, or a little over 15 yards a catch. He can kind of do it all. He's got really good size. I think 247 has him 6'1", 178. I think he has himself more 6'2", 190. Either way, he's a good body, good size receiver. Can kind of do a lot. He's a guy that I think we can do. He just can work anywhere in the offense. I think he's going to be more of an outside guy. I think that's where he's meant to be. But if he has to go inside sometimes every now and again, I think he can be just fine there. We need all the pass catchers we can get, and because I think this year is just a perfect example of what injuries can do to a room. And we did recruit well, and when all that good stuff. But I mean, I feel like for whatever reason, a lot of the freshmen that we had on staff didn't play. I don't know if they weren't ready, if the coaches felt they weren't good enough yet, or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, they didn't play. So I think going forward, I think Oklahoma learned a lesson as you've got to have guys that are ready to play and step in on day one if the worst case scenario happens again. And I think if you bring in guys like Daniel Odom and the guy we're going to talk about next, I think there's that kind of contingency building. And I think maybe that's what they're looking for. And Daniel Odom's on board already. Big time commitment. Hopefully we land the guy we talk about next.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and mention him. Jordan Clay, 6'3", 200 pounds, top 100 player in the country out of San Antonio, Texas. He currently is crystal ball to Texas, but the only 2 official visits that he has lined up, again, according to 24/7, are Baylor on the 13th of June and Oklahoma for Champion Barbecue, which is the weekend of the 20th. Both of these guys, kind of the prototype build for what Emmett Jones looks for. Odom being 6'1", Jordan being 6'3". I mean, we had Nick Anderson, he was sitting at 6'4". We still have Jaden Gibson sitting at that 6'3", 6'4" range. And really, if you look at Emmett Jones' recruiting over his time here, he really targets those big wide receivers. He favors that, which is good because those get if they have the speed. When you have a 6'2", 6'3" guy on the outside that can burn someone, it's hard to cover someone like that. I mean, Oklahoma has a lot of history with not just having guys of that size like a CeeDee Lamb, but playing against those guys and being burnt by them, like Quentin Johnson from TCU, who we just could not stop when he was in college. So having more and more guys like that in a wide receiver room is going to be helpful moving forward.
Yeah, it's true about Quentin Johnston, and it's really unfortunate because if you guys follow the NFL now, Quentin Johnston gets paid millions of dollars to catch a football, and he in fact hates to do it now. He for whatever reason just cannot catch a football now. But unfortunately, he loved to do it when he played the Sooners. Luckily, we got the best of them. in most of those outings, if not every single one of them. But Jordan Clay, another guy. You mentioned the size fantastic, speed fantastic. Look at his numbers from last year. Or the 2023 season. He had 819 yards, 11 touchdowns on 42 catches. That's a 19 and a half yard per catch average. That's something you take every single day. If you're able to, because if you follow his 24/7 page or whatever, he's currently crystal ball to the horns and he's warm on Baylor. So it looks as if it might be a task to pull him out of the state of Texas. It's trending that he kind of, just from looking at that he might want to stay in the state of Texas for his college career. But Oklahoma is the same thing. I've talked about it all the time. There's a lot of similarities between the two states. There's not, and it's close enough. I think Oklahoma can win out here, and that would be great. If you can add both of these guys in the 2026 class with a quarterback that you're going to be very, very confident in Jaden O'Neal as maybe the guy of the future. You look at it, if it all works out to plan, you have John Mateer for this season and hopefully next or whatever, and then you have Hawkins, and then you have Jaden O'Neal. So your quarterback room is shored up for a while. I think Hawkins is a guy that showed a lot last year. I think he's only going to get better. John Mateer is going to John Mateer, and if Jaden O'Neal is what he's advertised to be, it should help out with getting a lot of these big name receivers. And I think Daniel Odom and Jordan Clay would be a really, really great way to start this, 2026 receiver class. And you've already got one guy who has told you he's coming. He's committed to you. You just got to hold on to it at this point. And, you got to get Jordan Clay to not want to wear that stupid ass orange. And maybe him and Odom and Jaden O'Neal can, because I think Jaden O'Neal is going to be a champion as well. So, hopefully and I'm sure they will be. I feel like it goes without saying, but, it'd be cool if Odom and O'Neal and, whoever the other receivers or whatever on campus that are really leaning Oklahoma's way can kind of, give this guy a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer recruiting is going to be huge for Oklahoma during that weekend, as it is every single year that they've had that event. It's going to be interesting, really, how Oklahoma starts to establish themselves in South Texas. Because I would agree with you, in the Dallas area, you're going to find a pretty good split of Oklahoma and Texas fans, Texas Tech fans. Like that Dallas, North Texas area, you've got people from all over the country that come here and they end up going to Oklahoma for football or academics. South Texas, though, is a little bit of a different beast. If Oklahoma can establish some sort of pipeline to South Texas, or from South Texas to Oklahoma, and they have had a tough time in convincing guys that is the move for them, because it is so far, even though they're neighboring states. It's a long drive for those families, or plane tickets might be expensive, whatever the case may be. Look no further than the 5-star that Oklahoma wish they would have ended up with in David Hicks. He was from that South Texas area in Katy, and he seemed to be all Oklahoma, and then A&M was able to pull off an upset at the very, very end. Whatever the case was, being closer to home at the end of the day was something that helped A&M close that recruitment at once signing day came around. And even after that, there were plenty of rumors about him leaving through the portal. He is close to family because South Texas is still a little bit of a distance from Norman, Oklahoma. So if Oklahoma can find a way to establish a real presence down there for recruiting, it's going to be fun to see the different guys that they're able to start really hitting hard for in the recruiting in the recruiting side of things, because that opens up a ton of high schools for them to really establish roots with.
100%, man. And at the end of the day, it really just takes one or a couple to get it going, and hopefully you can kind of establish that pipeline you're talking about. Because you're 100% right, and I think a more recent example is Jonah Williams. The 5-star safety, a guy that really, really looked well for Oklahoma for a long time. Crystal Ball's coming in and all that stuff. He was going to play both sports at Oklahoma. Ultimately, he ended up at Texas. I think that's just. I think proximity when you're from the South Texas region really does play a different game, because I don't really think about it because they are neighboring states, but South Texas, depending on where you are, to Oklahoma is, you're driving like 12 hours or some shit. I mean, it's a hike. It's a whole ass travel. So it is what it is. But hopefully we can establish some of that pipeline you're talking about. And I think Jordan Clay at receiver would be he'd be a welcome addition to kind of get that rolling for us.
Definitely. Well, that is all for this video. Brandon, you have anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I was going to do a quick shout out to the Diamond Sports teams, but I fit that in earlier in the video. Hopefully they keep it rolling. And yeah, as Jose mentioned at the top of the video, we do plan on getting back to a more routine basis. It's just life's been kind of crazy, yeah, but we will be back.
It's just a matter of time.
Just a matter of
In a
time.
couple of weeks, we'll be back with another video. So let us know in the comments if there's any one specific you'd like us to cover, any topic that you want us to discuss on the podcast. We appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see y'all next time.